So now we've got the majority of the engine is all back together. We're starting to fill out our air guide pieces. I've got our air shroud sitting on. I've also put on the 2 pieces of tin on the back of the engine. Now these need to be on now just because next I'm going to put the exhaust on, and the exhaust will come up here. You can put them on after the exhaust is on, but I try and assemble this stuff where I've got lots of room to work, and so with no exhaust in my way it's a lot easier to work. So I'm just going to go ahead and spin my engine or roll my engine over to make putting my exhaust on easy. So before I put my exhaust on and my gaskets on, I'm going to use a little bit of copper grease. The copper is just going to go onto my studs. This is going to make it easier for the nuts to screw on. One of the advantages of using copper grease is as the grease portion burns off, the copper remains. So when it comes to undoing the nuts at a later date, if you have to take the exhaust off, hopefully they will come off a little bit easier. And that's it. We don't need a huge amount. I'm just going to go ahead, lay my gaskets over. And the last one. So I just want to have one last look around, make sure my oil line nut is tight, because it's not going to be accessible once this is on. And the exhaust should sit all the way down. You want to make sure that the stud is locked in over here. This stops the heater box from rattling. And the exhaust should sit all the way down. If you have to force it down or try and pull it down, then you need to stop and figure out why it's not attaching correctly. There's 2 different nuts that we're going to use to hold the exhaust on. We have a copper-coated M8 nut, and this is a 12 millimeter across the flats, which means that this dimension from here to here is 12 millimeters. You should not use the standard 13 millimeter across the flats, because you won't have enough room inside when you're bolting it up to fit the socket and the nut properly. The other nut that we're using is a barrel nut, and this uses an 8 millimeter Allen wrench, and these barrel nuts will come down through these access points down onto the stud, and we're just going to tighten them using a long Allen head socket. So when I put these on, I'll put them in the hole, and I'll just put a little bit of side tension. There is a tube that goes through this hole. And where I can, if I can reach my hand under, I will, so I can guide it through and drop it onto the stud. And you should be able to do these up finger tight until they contact the exhaust flange. So when it comes to putting on these nuts, I'll put them in my socket and turn my socket sideways. That way I can position it down and then roll it over and onto the stud. Okay, once you've got all 6 on, you can go ahead and start tightening some of these down. Okay, once you've got them all nipped down into place, you can go ahead and torque these, and these are going to be tightened to 18 Newton meters. So I've torqued down all of our flange bolts. Now I'm just going to put on a small flat washer and an M6 nut to hold our heat exchanger, and I'm just going to tighten that down. Then we're going to repeat the same on the other side. So now I've got all of my exhaust bolted down on both sides. I can go ahead and roll it over, and we can get ready to put the rear muffler on. The first thing that goes on the front of the engine is going to be the engine carrier. This is just going to slide onto these studs. Sometimes it'll leave a little tap just to seat it home. There are 4 10mm studs that hold this part on. The only different thing to remember is this one up here is a short stud that's inside it, uses a 15mm width across the flats versus 17mm. I'm just going to torque these to 35 Newton meters. The one down in here, I can't really get a torque wrench in there, so I'm just going to use my 15mm offset wrench. Now it's time to install the rear muffler. So I've got my new hardware, and I'm just going to mount my hardware onto the flanges and new gaskets. On this one, it's going to come in from this side, so we'll pick it up there. So I'm just going to hang that gasket there. Then I've got copper coated nuts, so we can just go ahead and slide the exhaust straight on. Okay, when we sit this on, it's going to tend to want to push the bolts out, and you may have to flex the header pipes. The other thing is we want to make sure that this lip right here is sitting on our muffler hanging lip right there. We don't want to be underneath it, we want to be sitting on it. Fitting of mufflers may require a little bit of adjustment, so we'll see how this lines up. So the way I do this is I get one side on, and then I just loosely put my nuts on. And this is so if I have to move the thing around, the bolts don't fall out. Gives me a little bit of flexibility. The other side, this is where it may need to flex. And you can see there's a little bit of misalignment right there, which is fairly normal. So I'm just going to go flex the muffler up, make sure I get on top. So I just have to flex the pipe over with a small pry bar to line up the bolt holes. Okay, these are 10mm bolts, so they're going to torque to 35 Newton meters. So when it comes to installing the muffler straps, especially new straps, they're going to have to conform to the shape of the muffler. We've got this piece here, we've got our mounting flange on the back, so there's a lot of things that the strap has to conform to. When you're using a new one, to get them to conform can be a little bit of a fight to install. I put copper grease on the threads for two reasons. It's stainless hardware, so it's not going to corrode too much, but it's going to be under some pressure when we bend this around, so I put some grease on there to help as I tighten it up to allow it to go into the threads a little easier. The other thing that I'm going to use is a pair of large channel locks. And what that's going to do is going to allow me to squeeze everything together and get it close to get the thread started. So once I've got the thread started, and this one actually wasn't too bad, you want to position it so the bolt is kind of facing straight up behind the engine. That way you don't want it laying down here on the ground, because then it's going to reduce the ground clearance of the engine. You don't want it out here on this side, because then it's going to interfere when you put the engine in. So once I've got it started, I'm just going to go ahead and tighten it up, making sure that I'm on my strap for my hanger. Now you want to make sure that the strap is tight all the way and supporting it up against the hanger. You also want to make sure the bolt has got room to move, so you can see I've got a clearance between the engine carrier right here. You don't want the bolt running in, so you want the strap to tighten up, and the strap will conform to the muffler and to the muffler hanger. And that's it for the rear muffler.